For centuries, historians comfortably believed that the Viking phenomenon kicked off like a sudden summer thunderstorm on June 8, 793, at Lindisfarne. It was a neat, well-packaged narrative. Unfortunately, modern archaeology, being the ultimate party pooper of historical consensus, decided to ruin this simplicity during a routine road construction project on Saaremaa Island in Estonia. Workers stumbled upon two buried ships containing the chaotic remains of over 40 Scandinavian warriors. The bones showed all the classic hallmarks of a terrible day at the office: hacked limbs, shattered skulls, and cervical spines cleanly sliced through. Polite academic speak for getting your head chopped off from behind. This wasn't a peaceful retirement community. It was a mass battle grave dating back a full century before the official start of the Viking Age. It turns out the Vikings didn't suddenly invent piracy in 793 because they were bored. They had been beta testing their aggressive, uninvited tourism model in Estonia for generations, without filing the paperwork with Anglo-Saxon chroniclers. Talon researchers verified that these early tourists were definitively Scandinavian. They were buried in a rush, but with enough comrades remaining to lay them out with their expensive weapons. This proves that long before Europe noticed them, the Norsemen were already refining their core competencies: complex logistical planning, weaponized synchronization, and maximum psychological impact on unsuspecting coastal residents. While Western monks were busy composing dramatic prose about dragons in the sky and divine punishments, Swedish Norsemen looked east and realized that rivers were essentially early medieval superhighways. They penetrated deep into the Russian plains along the Volga and Volkhov rivers, setting up camp in places like Staria Ladiga, long before anyone bothered to write down their names in a formal chronicle. What drove them to navigate these grueling waterways? The answer is simple: a profound cross-cultural love for silver. The Caspian Sea region was practically minting silver dirhams by the millions, and the Vikings possessed a highly effective method of wealth redistribution. They didn't really care about the distinction between being a trader and a raider. Those were merely fluid marketing terms, depending on how well armed the locals happened to be on any given Tuesday. The Eastern European river networks offered the perfect corporate landscape. Local Slavic populations practicing peaceful slash-and-burn agriculture, and Arabic markets overflowing with shiny silver coins. To the Norse mindset, leaving that silver untouched would have been financially irresponsible. The trade web was vast and unapologetically globalized. Furs, walrus ivory, and amber flowed one way. Weapons, silver, and immense human collateral flowed the other. Arab markets in the 10th century were notoriously flooded with slaves sourced directly from Eastern Europe, courtesy of Scandinavian logistics. Eventually, local tribes allegedly invited a Norse chieftain named Rurik to bring order and protection, an early historical blueprint for paying protection money to the exact people you need protection from. Back on the Atlantic front, the year 793 finally arrived, and with it, the infamous sacking of Lindisfarne Monastery. Monks like Alcuin of York wept bitterly, claiming the Church of St. Cuthbert was spattered with the blood of the priests of God, despoiled of all its ornaments. To the Anglo-Saxons, this was clearly a sign of God's wrath, possibly triggered by their own insufficient piety, or the presence of literal dragons spotted in the Northumbrian skies earlier that year. However, modern archaeological interpretation suggests a slightly less supernatural motive. Just south of Denmark, Charlemagne, the self-appointed champion of Christian virtue, was wrapping up a brutal 30-year campaign of forcible conversions against the Saxons, which involved a lot of casual decapitations for anyone refusing baptism. The Scandinavian raids on wealthy, unprotected monasteries might not have been random acts of mindless pagan malice, but rather a targeted, highly strategic counteroffensive against Christian cultural imperialism. Sacking an isolated, highly affluent monastery that possesses zero standing military defense is less of a theological statement and more of an optimal business decision. If it also happened to annoy Charlemagne's cultural ministers, that was just a pleasant corporate bonus. Meanwhile, in places like Shetland and Orkney, the indigenous Pictish culture mysteriously evaporated precisely when Norwegian settlers arrived. At Jarlshof, archaeology clearly shows Viking longhouses being built right on top of Pictish dwellings. Whether the Picts were politely asked to leave or forcefully integrated into the Norse agricultural workforce remains a matter of polite academic debate, though the sudden disappearance of their entire culture offers a subtle hint. By the mid-9th century, the Vikings decided that petty hit-and-run coastal raiding was an inefficient use of their massive manpower. Recognizing that England was not a unified nation, but rather a dysfunctional patchwork of 4 mutually hostile kingdoms constantly fighting each other, the Norsemen saw a prime investment opportunity. In 865, the Great Heathen Army landed in East Anglia, led by the delightfully named trio of Ivar the Boneless, Halfdan, Ubba, and Guthrum. They marched straight to York, capturing it on All Saints' Day, strategically striking while the local Northumbrian rival kings were distracted by religious festivities. After executing the local monarchs, allegedly involving the highly dramatic, if archaeologically elusive, blood eagle torture, they turned York into a thriving Scandinavian capital for the next century. Soon, the Norsemen stopped packing their bags for the winter. They stayed, built farms, and transformed the entire northern half of England into an administrative zone known as the Danelaw. King Alfred of Wessex is remembered by history as the Great because he successfully implemented an advanced taxation system and built fortress towns to stop the Vikings. In essence, he had to invent a modern bureaucratic state just to make England too expensive and annoying for the Norsemen to bother conquering completely. The political drama extended all the way to Norway, where a local warlord named Harold Fairhair was busy aggressively uniting the country under his personal brand. Nobles who took issue with paying taxes and swearing loyalty to this new king decided that packing up their ships and fleeing to an uninhabited volcanic rock called Iceland was a much better alternative. Thus, Iceland's parliament was born out of a collective aristocratic refusal to pay mainland income tax. As the first millennium drew to a close, the Viking world achieved a staggering level of economic integration. Excavations at trading hubs like Trousseau reveal a highly standardized system of weights, crafts, and Arabic coins spanning from Britain to northern Russia. This was early medieval globalization, entirely fueled by a beautiful synergy of manufacturing, shipping, and extreme violence. The sheer scale of their geographic reach was absurd. While Leif Erikson and his fellow venture capitalists were exploring the coast of North America, Vinland, and chatting with bewildered Native Americans, their cousins in the east were serving as the personal elite bodyguards, the Varangian Guard, for the Byzantine Emperor in Constantinople. A Norseman could reasonably start his career robbing a farmstead in Scotland, spend his mid-20s trading slaves in Russia, and retire with a handsome pension funded by the taxpayers of the Roman Empire. The popular myth insists that Vikings were wild, lawless anarchists who loved dying in battle. In truth, they loved money, admired institutional efficiency, and copied the state apparatus of their enemies the moment it became profitable to do so. By the 11th century, the era of the freelance pirate chieftain was dead. In their place stood institutionalized, highly professional Christian Viking kings ruling entire unified nations. These ultimate overlords unleashed massive, state-sponsored standing armies against England and each other, spilling more blood in a single campaign than their ancestors did in a century of uncoordinated raiding. The wild, freebooting raider had successfully evolved into the modern state executive, proving that if you plunder long enough and successfully enough, history eventually stops calling you a pirate and starts calling you a king.